Splatoon 3 is shaping up to be the ultimate package for fans of the series, a true refinement on the technology behind Splatoon 2, a whole 5 years of development later. Now, courtesy of a trip to Nintendo's HQ for capture, this week I'm able to offer up a quick sneak peek at the state of the game. A game that builds on a quirky, third-person shooter formula with more modes, inkling customization, and ways to splatter ink across its colourful maps. Also, the final global release of Splatoon 3 is the 9th of September, so really not too long to wait at all. Much of the content of the game is still shrouded in mystery, especially the specifics of its story. Still though, after 2 hours spent with its opening levels and multiplayer modes, it's clear Nintendo's use of the Switch is as strong as ever. So what did we get to play? Well, for the story mode side, Splatoon 3 opens with a selection of early tutorials across a new area called Alterna. Each level has a unique visual style, but early missions present as a kind of obstacle course of metal blocks and grindable rails set over a deep ocean. There are some nice touches right away. A soft mist effect beds in the background details, which almost look like an abandoned oil rig, of debris, metal scraps, and sunken concrete supports. Later areas spice up the formula more so, surrounding us, like in this case, with a ring of animating CRTs. Again, all this shows the basics of how to play Splatoon. Paint guns and paint rollers are the usual tools of choice for colouring each surface with ink. And then, of course, we're able to swim inside the ink by transforming to our squid form in the usual slick fashion. It's a necessary ramp up, I think, for the uninitiated, but every level I've seen so far also gives a great sample of the invention that goes into each map. As ever, Splatoon 3 remains a truly Nintendo spin on the third-person formula, but to make it work, the game still leans most heavily on this visual effect, the ink itself. Every blob of ink looks and feels dynamic. Shadows naturally form inside large pools of ink, for example, and there's a specular property to the material as well as sunlight bounces off it. The result? It carries a satisfying sense of depth and of height. Mechanically, of course, Splatoon 3 on the surface anyway isn't striving to distance itself too much from Splatoon 2, but then it doesn't really need to. Ultimately, it appears to be, so far anyway, setting itself apart by focusing on more ways to spray this ink around. That means more extensive weapons, more abilities, and customization than before for your Inkling or Octoling. The big surprise for me? Well, that'd be a new addition called the Tri-Stringer. Moving to this sun-kissed map in Alterna, the Tri-Stringer is a charging bow-style weapon that lets you fire on a point, with a delayed explosion letting you solve platform puzzles. In multiplayer too, the potential is there for great ranged play. At the heart of Splatoon is of course its competitive multiplayer, and it's here perhaps we're seeing Splatoon 3's biggest area of expansion. You open with a loadout screen with some frankly exhaustive options. Rollers, sprays, and blasters, it's all there. There's no shortage of ways to get that ink around. Jumping into the action, first there's the classic turf war mode, a series staple where the goal is to spread the most ink across the stage. This is running here with 8 local players on a network, and it all ran without a single hiccup in my experience. So hopefully this holds up for the true online play as well. Now next up, we got to sample the return of a 4-player co-op mode called Salmon Run. Set on a map called Sockeye Station, one of the more detailed and busy areas shown, we survive waves of enemies while delivering eggs to the centre. We're promised around 12 multiplayer stages at the game's launch, with more possibly to come via the planned DLC, but the outlook, in terms of map design and weapons, is that there's a serious focus on visual and mechanical variety in Splatoon 3. Looking at the tech details of Splatoon 3, we're given a similarly robust setup to Splatoon 2, but possibly with a few changes. In terms of native resolution, once again the actual in-game action runs at a dynamic 1080p, DRS is used to adjust for GPU load on Switch, and in my lowest reading in pixel testing, it comes to 1460 by 820, just as we respawn on the map during the 8-player turf war game. In fact, zooming close, you'll even notice here the pixel structure adjusting on the fly between set resolutions like 1080p, 900p and 820p. It's all very rapid and going frame by frame, but broadly this is a similar range to Splatoon 2 for docked play on Switch. All of this is of course in service of keeping 60 FPS absolutely locked down. Also, the lowest readings pixel count wise tend to come in just after loading a map, giving us this side-on perspective of the entire terrain. But generally speaking, I'm actually surprised how much of play runs at that top 1080p resolution once you're right at the centre of the action. At this point, it's interesting to note Splatoon 3 may have adjusted its scaling technology since Splatoon 2. Based on recent circulations on Twitter, copyrights in the game show AMD's Fidelity FX Super Resolution, FSR, 1.0 scaling technology is included. Obviously, PC users have moved on to FSR 2.0 now, a method closer to Nvidia's DLSS that uses temporal scaling to improve the image using previous frames. Instead, FSR 1.0 is limited in using a spatial scale technique based on current frame data. Still, in theory, if it is indeed in use here, this would help improve image quality and performance over previous games in the series. In my experience, even looking close at Splatoon 3, there isn't a stark upgrade perceptually to how the scale is handled. There's no anti-aliasing for a start, just as with Splatoon 2, and so once again, all pixels present in a very raw fashion while docked. FSR 1.0 or not, the game in its current state shows the usual visible shimmer as the DRS does its work. We'll be back to look at the state of image quality in the full review. But for now, thankfully, the HUD is presented at a full 1080p in Splatoon 3, and equally as for Switch's portable play, there will be more to see later on. Sadly, I didn't have a chance to capture handheld mode, though chances are pretty high we'll see a repeat of the dynamic 720p situation in Splatoon 2. Focusing on the docked play for framerate testing though, a dynamic 1080p makes 60 FPS possible. Keeping a 60 FPS lock is absolutely essential for its frenetic action, and I'm glad to say Splatoon 3 nails it once again. Usually we'd go into a preview event with a bit of trepidation in making any final call, but here I'm pretty confident what we're seeing is what we'll get on release. It's 60 frames per second, and across my hour of capture, it doesn't miss a single frame at any point. So, mission accomplished once again. All signs point to Splatoon 3 being the most feature-complete, refined take of Nintendo's third-person shooter series. My colleague John Linneman will be back with a full review of the game in due course, and there we'll be able to see much more in the final build, the hub areas like Splatsville and the connecting areas between the maps. And actually, you, yourself, could give the game a try soon enough. If you fancy a go this weekend, a Splatfest public beta will be going live. It's a 4 to 5 GB download on Switch and kicks off on Saturday 27th of August to be precise, though times will vary by region. There's plenty to be said for Nintendo's evolving use of the Switch hardware. Xenoblade Chronicles 3, most recently of course, showed how repeat refinement of an engine helps to create a better, cleaner end image and a more technically balanced end result. In Splatoon 3's case, there's a sense the focus is in expanding out the content itself, using the already stable technical base of Splatoon 2. But with more time spent on the story mode, the multiplayer and its ever more lavish weapons, we'll see once the game's out in full. But for now, that's all from me today. If you did enjoy this quick look, feel free to like or subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell for instant notifications as any new video lands. To get a high quality version of this video, check out our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net, and to get in touch directly, just use Twitter. But from me for now, thanks for watching.